I can.
All
I
right, dude.
can.
Good to have you here, man.
Man, it's so
Um,
good to be here. So thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Your background is way better than mine.
I got branding going all over the place.
I know. That is definitely one thing I am missing. So just for the minute before you hopped on, I was just mentioning like when it comes to finances and managing your money and setting yourself up for success from a financial perspective in our entrepreneurial businesses, it doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, you know?
No.
And because it's all like, yeah, let's create revenue. But like things like no one ever talks about profit margin. No one ever talks about, okay, once you make that money, what are you doing with it? How are you
Right.
setting yourself up for success? Um, and so forth. So where does one even start to think about this sort of thing?
So you're so on this. The fact of the matter is that we actually start to we look at the business as this separate organism, which it is indirectly, from us and from our personal wealth and our personal finances and everything. And that's true. The challenge is that it actually is the funding vehicle for our personal wealth, for our financial freedom, for our financial liberation. So you can't look at it completely as this separate organism. It is this integrated system, which includes your business. And so the first thing is to start to look at it and say, wait a second, if I have my business here, my life is above the business, and I need to be not only the CEO of the business, but I need to be a CEO of my life. And
Hmm.
so I'm funding a lifestyle and a life and a future via the business, at least to start. And
Yeah.
and so that then comes back to this other piece is that, it sounds horrible, but we get caught up in all kinds of vanity metrics, and believe it or not, revenue is a vanity metric.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because unless that revenue is turned into profits, then and those profits are being able to be used to, one, grow the business and two, grow your wealth at the same time, then it doesn't matter how much your sales are. I mean, I had partners at one point, and we split, and the year that we split, they kind of pushed me out, and I said, look, here's the deal. We had 30 employees. I had two other partners, so it was three of us, and it cost us $1.2 million just to open the doors before we ever saw a dime. And I
Mm.
said, all right, I'm out. That's great. Here's what I need. I want an office. I want access to the infrastructure, like the copier, and I almost said Xerox machine, but that might age me. Um,
Definitely age you.
yeah, at least I didn't say typewriter.
It's
People
true.
wouldn't know what the hell I'm talking about. Uh, and obviously one support staff. So I went down to me and someone else. They kept the rest of the infrastructure and the overhead and everything. And that first year, my revenue was probably 60 to 70% of theirs. But
Hmm.
what I took home was like three times what they took home. And I think that's the thing that we need to think about, is that too often we're worried about how do we scale our revenues. I'd actually prefer to look at it and say, how do we scale our profits? Because it's
Yeah.
from the profits that we can, one, fund future growth, but two, fund our future period.
So before we discuss that a little bit, I think it's really important to address um, our like revenue goals
Yeah.
because and this is something that you and I talked about. I remember exactly where I was when we had this discussion. I think it was last year. We talked about so many people have these arbitrary random that's the same thing, arbitrary revenue goals
Yeah.
for their business. And I had this too, right? And we get all super stressed out when we're trying to chase this number, when in reality it's exactly that. It's an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
But I love your perspective on this because yours is rooted in all right, how much do you need to live? How much do you
Yeah.
need to allow your family to have the lifestyle that you want, whatever that is, whether it's 5 grand a month or 50,000 a month or whatever it is. And you just start working backwards from there. But now you're working with an actual tangible number that means something. Talk about that for a little bit.
So type of thing. The problem is that if that income doesn't create the life that we want, then we miss the target. And too often we actually don't even do any planning at all. And it's just grow, 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 grow for the sake of growing. And you turn into what I call a treadmill entrepreneur, because all you do is get on that treadmill and you start running and you say, I got to run faster, 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 longer, harder. You hit and you end up in burnout. You end up in breakdown. And you go from treadmill entrepreneur to dreadmill entrepreneur because you're dreading every freaking day.
Yeah.
And so what I think we need to look at is that the reason that we typically run like that is we don't know where the finish line is. We don't even know that we got there.
Yeah.
And so
nothing's ever enough.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I did great. How do I do more? How do I do more? How do I do more? I think what we need to do is more lifestyle planning. In other words, let's look at the vision for our life. Now, it's going to change. It's going to shift. Like your life shifted, your priorities shifted when Maya was born. You know, I've got a granddaughter coming into the world. Things have changed, or there'll be differences that we need to think about. But understanding and saying, let me paint a picture of what the life is that I'm trying to create. And from that life, then let's figure out what the price tag on that life is. What does it take for me to fund that on a monthly basis? Yeah. And now all of a sudden, instead of chasing whatever income you're making now, you're chasing an income stream to fund the vision you had for your life, and do it that way, which is far, first off, it's far, far more attractive because you know what the goal is, you know what the finish line is, you know when you get there, and you have the ability to change it any time, but at least you got there. You know, in 2010, I got in a bike wreck, a mountain biking accident. I flipped my bike on concrete. Thank God I had a helmet. But the reality was that the reason it flipped was I didn't tie my shoes right, believe it or not.
Dude, I got to jump in here real quick. I didn't know this story as well as you and I know each other. I didn't even know this story until I was listening to your podcast the other day. And I was like,
really?
I've never heard this story before. So guys, just to jump in real quick, Mel's new podcast called The Affluent Entrepreneur is really, really good. He just launched it, last week, right?
Last week. But
Wednesday. You've already got 6 episodes out or 5 episodes out. It's really, really good. And I will say that this week's episode, I think it was Monday, on your money story is amazing. Okay, with that said, I never heard the story about the mountain bike.
So this story, actually, the person that I'm talking about is actually on. I just saw him log in. He's a brother from another mother, Richard. And I had the bike. I got in the bike accident, and so I'm recovering. I got the neck brace on, and he calls me up, and we grew up together. And he says, and he was retired in his mid-30s. You know, he's kind of doing his thing. He says, taking you to lunch. So we went to a place called The Hat. It's like the best pastrami sandwiches around, when I used to eat pastrami. And I remember him sitting across the table from me, and he looks at me and he says, how much is enough? How much is enough? Yeah. Like I didn't have an answer first, but it was basically what he was saying is that you were distracted, you were angry, you weren't paying attention to details, and the reason you got into an accident is because you didn't even know what your target was. Yeah. You didn't know where the finish line was. And if you never know what the finish line was, you're going to continue to run, and you're running at breakneck speed, and all of a sudden there's breakdown or burnout and dread. And it's a challenge. And so really, this whole idea of figuring out what kind of life do you want and building to that life is a better, more fulfilling journey than just some nebulous or arbitrary number that you're trying to create.
This right here, guys, for everybody watching, is so many of us don't think about our business in this way. And I didn't for a long time either, until frankly Mel set me straight on this stuff. But it's like nothing's ever enough, and that's something that I always struggle with, right? And so it's not your fault that you haven't thought like this, is because no one ever talks about it. Yeah. And the only thing anybody ever talks about is like, oh, you got to shoot for $1 million business, or you haven't made it until quote unquote that you have a 7-figure business. I mean, that's what I used to think, right? But it is a complete fallacy, right? So walk through like a specific example. Let's just say that, someone's lifestyle, they want $10,000 a month to live the lifestyle that they want. So, but what that doesn't mean is, oh, okay, I need to generate $10,000 in my business every single month.
Well, you can do it that way, but then the problem is you got to stay on the treadmill.
Right.
And unless you can create a financial machine built on investable assets, a variety of different ones, that will generate cash flow. Now, I don't buy into this whole idea of passive income, because I think passive insinuates that you can set it and forget it. And the problem is that you have a relationship with money. And just like any relationship, if you got passive about your relationship with Amy, first she'd kick your behind. But what, you think about it and go, how would that relationship be? The relationship would start to decline.
You got to nurture it.
It is the same thing with money. So if we get passive about our relationship with money, in other words, we're not checking the pulse on the patient, we're not watching over the numbers, we're not diligent about what we're doing and making sure that things are performing. And I'm not saying you need to be some finance whiz, but you got to at least do some math and watch it. Then here's the thing that I know is that when you forget about your money, in time it'll forget about you. And so we really want to make sure that we're in the game in a way that we're staying on top of the money that's coming in. And so now we need to build a machine of investable assets that's going to drive the cash flow. This is, and I'm going to give credit where credit's due. The guy that was with me at the Hat, who's actually on, Richard, his what do you call it? Handle is Outlaw on here. I mean, he did this. He did this in his mid-30s, and he's been basically off the treadmill since his mid-30s. Doing his thing. And he's older than me, but I'm better looking and wittier than him. So I'm going to pay for that. So the reality is that that he was an example, and I just kind of kept going in doing this. It is truly possible to sit back and say, how do I build a machine? Now, if you say $10,000 a month, let's just look at it in the context of this. $10,000 a month is $120,000 a year. So $120,000 a year. If you want to be able to do nothing, and let's make the numbers easy.
Sorry, Mel, before you get to that, I want to jump in and say, if $10,000 a month is your number, that it's to live the lifestyle that you want, I'm assuming we're talking about take home, which means that we need to make more than $10,000 a month because we got taxes and all that stuff. So that's a misnomer that a lot of people that I had for a long time too.
Yeah. So if $10,000 a month is your take home, tack on about 30%. And depending on what happens, no politics here, okay? But depending on what happens with the new administration, with their tax law, it might be more than 30%. And if you're in our wonderful state of California, it's probably approaching 40%, depending on whether you're married and the income level. So
Yeah.
we need to be smart about it. So if we said that we need 10,000 cash, take home, you add 30% to that, call it 13,000.
Yeah.
Now you're going to make the math harder for me, but $150,000 a year from our investment portfolio. And that could be everything from stocks, bonds, ETFs, index funds, real estate, dividend paying stocks. It's things that can generate cash flow without liquidating the asset. Okay.
Yep.
So if I say $150,000, if I say that it's a conservative earnings rate, very conservative, of 5%, well, we need to build a machine about $3 million. If I have a machine of $3 million, the system's broken.
Yeah.
And the system was built on the foundation of industrial age thinking, where in the industrial age, in the early 1900s, you started to get pensions. Pensions are lifetime income. And unless you build your own machine for lifetime income, or you're lucky to work for one of the few companies that still have a pension, a 401k and an IRA isn't lifetime income unless it's built big enough.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, and for a while there, myself included, that seems so far off.
Yeah.
Right? Is enough.
Yeah.
And so, all right, let's just say we've got the emergency fund, and I know that you recommend a year, correct? Has that changed at all?
Well, my average is a year. I still think that we, as entrepreneurs, we need minimum 9 months, and I'd push to 18 months if I could, because look, you're in shock the first few months, you're in paralysis the second few months, then you're in analysis the third few months, and then all of a sudden you're starting to take action.
Yeah.
So by that time you've eaten up a year's worth of cash flow, if we're not careful. And so we want to make sure. And if we don't believe that things can be changed and stuck in a position for a year, so let's just look at the last 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless it's a retirement account, but we need to be deliberate in it. Too often, what we do is we earn income. I call this the wealth priority pathway. We earn income, we spend the money on our lifestyle, and then we look at what's left, and what's left is what we fund our future with. But
yeah,
listen, if all we're doing is funding our future with what's left, we're funding a future with the scraps. And I think our future's worth more than the scraps.
Yeah.
And if you look at the wealthy, many of them, they still will spend. I mean, let's face it, I'm not on ramen and mac and cheese, and you're not, Richard's not, per se, so it's like, what we do is we create income, we make the building of the machine one of the priorities, and then we look at what can we fund from our life. And if we don't like the lifestyle because we don't have enough to fund the lifestyle we want, then we, as entrepreneurs, go out and say, how do we make it happen? Do we take a side gig? Do we scale our income? Do we look at our profitability, change our expense structure, build more revenues, bring in another offering, those kinds of things? Because as entrepreneurs, we have the blessing of being able to affect both sides of the equation. We can affect our expenses, and we can find ways to generate more income.
Yeah, and guys, as entrepreneurs, the revenue comes as a result of value that you provide and the energy that you're putting out. There is a question there, Mel. Can you be specific about what you mean by an asset?
So, and Stephanie hates when I do this, but you know, I'm going to do it anyways. So what I mean by an asset is an asset that can generate cash flow that I can live off of. Okay. So the house that I live in, which is a beautiful home right on the water here in Laguna, was absolutely one of the worst investments I could make from a cash flow standpoint, because I tied up a fair amount of cash that could be earning me money down the road. So I don't look at a residence as an asset in the context of investable assets. Now, let me be clear. Why did I buy the house? Why did we buy the house? Why was it important? Because the currency that I looked at it through wasn't a return on investment. The reason I bought the house was I saw how Stephanie felt when she stood in the kitchen.
Who's your wife, by the way? Yeah.
Yes, Stephanie's my wife.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the currency was fulfillment, and it wasn't cash in that case. And now I didn't over encumber myself. I didn't go into an amount of debt that was choking me. I did it smart. If it was not affordable, no matter how she felt in the kitchen, we weren't going to do it. Okay. Yeah. So we still were smart about it, and it didn't impact. We still had the machine in place, so we were good. So when we talk about assets, I'm talking about things like rental real estate, potentially, dividend paying stocks, ETFs, annuities, those kinds of things. You have the ability to do Airbnbs. You have the ability to create courses. A lot of your audience is in the digital space. Well, there's no better way to leverage your knowledge, your wisdom, your thinking than to create a course. And now you created it once and you sell it repeatedly and you get paid. Think about this for a moment. Think about this for a moment. I create a course that I sell for $1,000. Okay. And I take the very first course sale for every single month at $1,000 and take 100% of that and I put it into an investment account. If I do that every single month, 30 years at 8%, you got $1.2 million. One course, once a month, 12 courses a year at $1,000, 30 years. Now, if you sit back and go, I don't want to go 30 years, go 20 years. 20 years is still going to be 600,000, 500,000, 800,000. I mean, point being is that it doesn't take a lot to make a lot. It means that you got to get in the game and stay in the game. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you break all, and you guys can tell how passionate Mel is about this topic here. And that passion comes through in his podcast. So has anybody here listened to Mel's new podcast called The Affluent Entrepreneur? Yeah, I see. Love it. And guys, like I mentioned before, Monday's episode, I think it was Monday, right, Mel? About your money story. And I'm not just saying this is because Mel is one of my very, very good friends. It's one of the best explanations backed with data, backed with Mel shares stories, and then like how to. You know, I'm seeing like, no, but I will now. I just subscribed to it. Yeah, guys, definitely check this podcast out. Monday's episode, and I have studied the whole money story. I come from, you know, money doesn't grow on trees. And this is something that I have taken the latter part of my life to overcome these.
We've had numerous conversations around it.
Yeah. And And look, I love my parents, and my dad, you know, rest in peace. Like he was an auto mechanic, very blue collar, and my mom was a children's librarian. I definitely came from that limiting mindset around money, like rich people are bad, it doesn't grow on trees, we can't afford that, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And so that is, you know, obviously something that I've worked to overcome, but you got to be aware of it first. And in Monday's episode, Mel breaks that down, and I literally texted him after. I said, dude, like, I've studied this stuff for years. I've read stuff, I've listened to stuff, I've watched videos, whatever. That right there is probably the best overarching explanation of where this comes from and what to do about it, that I've heard yet. And so I see a lot of people saying they love you, haven't listened to the podcast, but they're going to now. Yeah. What other types of things are people going to get from the show?
So the Affluent Entrepreneur Show is focused on, and if you want to go to the show, just go to the affluententrepreneurshow.com. But here's the thing. It's focused on entrepreneurs, but it's focused on money. Bottom line is, too often the reason we're at where we're at, why you had some of the challenges, is we never have these conversations around money.
Yeah.
And as entrepreneurs and as business people, whether you are or aren't, we need to have conversations around money. There is no problem on this planet that gets solved if we don't talk about it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But let's have real conversations. Let's not create complicated discussions that don't need to be complicated. Let's not create fear. Let's not create, scarcity. Let's look at it. I truly believe that financial independence is a birthright, and we just need to go claim the doggone thing.
Mm.
And that's the way I look at it. And so now this show is really where the intersection of your business and your money lie. And the purpose of it is, how do we scale our life? And the only way we scale our life is we have to scale the business, which is what most entrepreneurs focus on. But at the same time, we have to scale our money. And when we scale our money and our life and our business at the same time, we can scale our life, because it's not about wealth. Wealth is a statistic. It's about richness. It's about the experiences. It's about the people you share. It's about those things that you can create. When I talk about this affluent entrepreneur, it's about someone that lives that richer lifestyle, which doesn't mean that it's ostentatious. It doesn't. In fact, I explained that in one of the episodes.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're living lavishly. It could be, but the real question is, are you living your world, your success, your finish line? And if that, I use this example just for Rick. If that's a tent in Montana, cool. If it's a yacht in Monaco, totally good. The real question is it of your choosing? Because if it's of the neighbors, the social media, the Facebooks, the media, or your parents, man, live your life. Live your life. Define it your way. That's your finish line.
Yeah.
And that's what this show is about, to have those conversations in a way. And right now it's me doing content because I want people to get to know it and get some foundational principles out there. But more importantly, I'm going to bring people like Rick. You're going to come on as a guest. That was my indirect way of demanding it and not
I didn't know that.
asking it. Okay. But also I want questions from the audience, and I want to answer those questions at the same time that I want to bring some of the audience members on and do live coaching, live mentoring to help them out. This show is for you to make that happen. And so, like, for instance, I had a gal who sent me a note saying, how do I have a conversation with my kids? And when should I have that conversation with my kids around money and this and that? I started talking to Jeremy, my son, about money when he was 10 years old, 10 and a half years old. So I'm actually going to do a whole episode, at least one episode, just on kids. What do you do with kids? And then I'll probably bring Jeremy on. He's 31 years old. His wife's 27. They're expecting their first child. 31, 27. They have 3 homes already, and they got a net worth in the multi-millions.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we'll bring them on to chat. So the point is that if I see that there's a need or a question that makes sense for the broader group, I'll do an episode on it. I'll answer the questions. This is what it's about.
Yeah. And you have a Facebook group too, right?
I have a Facebook group called the Affluent Entrepreneur group. It's where we can have these conversations, put some questions in. I'll go live in there and do that. and that type of thing. I'm also doing a giveaway. That link I just gave you, theaffluententrepreneurshow.com, will take you to a page. You go there, you can listen to the show, you can subscribe, you can leave me a review. If you do the review, here's the deal. Take a screenshot of it, send it to me, just follow the directions on that page, and I'll put you in a giveaway. And I've got all kinds of things that we're going to give away, including a strategy session with me. Someone's going to be a featured guest on one of my episodes. So we're going to have some fun.
I didn't know about that, so I'm going to submit my screenshot. Hey, before we wrap up, this is a question that I'm so glad was brought up, because this is a question that you get all the time. Mariano, right? Mariano was asking, when is it too late to start?
Never. I mean, it's an easy answer, but the reality is that are we, because look, we can sit back, and this is a really good question, because I think a lot of people are beating themselves up today.
Yeah.
Because of where they are financially, because they didn't, I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have listened to my parents, I should have listened to so-and-so, I should have had more money here, I shouldn't have spent on this. And it doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
Listen, Richard, I'm calling you out. I don't know if you're still on, but he's one of the guys that was in the Ponzi scheme with me. We both lost a lot of money in that Ponzi scheme. And if we took the time and just beat ourselves up since 2005, where would we be today?
Not helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So the point being is that no matter where you are in life, forgetting the decisions that you make, you are where you are. Let's start from where you are, and let's look at it. And if you made bad decisions in the past, let's look for the lessons in those choices. I learned some things from the Ponzi scheme. I changed my investing rules. I changed some of the things that I do. So once you figure out the lessons, you can move on and do that. So my point is that if you're later in life, we still need to start, because what are you going to do? You know what? That the majority of people over the age of 60 have less than 100,000 saved for retirement. That's a travesty. Now, that means that we need to get on the horse. If you're up there in age. Now I'll be 60 this year. I know I act 12 and I look 20.
You do act 12, but I like it.
But the bottom line is that it's never too late. It just means that we may have a steeper hill to climb. We may have to push harder up the hill. We may have to look more critically at spending and things like that. So we need to get in the game as soon as possible and not worry about what age or stage we're at. Yeah.
Just before we wrap up, somebody asked, what's the link to your podcast again?
It's the show name, the affluententrepreneurshow.com.
Yeah, guys, the affluententrepreneurshow.com. That's Mel's new podcast. Definitely check it out.
I couldn't get anything more complicated to spell on a URL.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, I can never spell the word entrepreneur. Guys, check out his podcast. It's so good. It's all about having this discussion, having conversation around money and finances, just like we've just been touching on here today. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss any episodes. Leave Mel a quick rating and review there. It's always super helpful for us podcasters. And dude, thanks for coming on here and chatting some money here with us.
Oh my God, anytime, my friend, man. It's always a gift to just see your smiling face and have these conversations, brother.
All right, brother. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank y'all.
See you guys.
See ya.